Welcome to The Thriving Marriage, the podcast for those who want to get their spouse back in love with them and truly thrive.
You'll learn why 95% of people don't save their marriage and the secret method no one else is talking about that will change everything for you. Are you ready? Let's turn tragedy to triumph.
Here are your hosts, international marriage experts, Mark Johnston and Heather Choate.
Relationship expert, the lead coach here with High Thrive Coaching. So some of you may have noticed that we've had some interesting issues. You may have seen Heather essentially completely disappear off of Facebook. She is still around. She is still alive and well. We're just experiencing some odd issues here with that account for some reason that we're trying to get to the bottom of, which is part of the reason why Heather is not here with me today. Now, I did want to make sure that we kept the podcast this week, which is why I'm here with all of you right now. So the topic that was put out there was dealing with a partner's midlife crisis. And I know a lot of you have asked this question. I hear it all the time. People saying, okay, well, is this just simply a midlife crisis? With this idea that, okay, well, if it's just a midlife crisis, it's going to pass and it's fine. And I want to give you some information on this and help you to understand what's going on and what is really needed in a situation like this. This topic was picked by all of you, our audience, and I hope it is helpful for you today. But before we get into that, I do want to get into the client win of the week. So as always, I don't like to assume that people are okay with us sharing their names or information. So I always like to change the name in these cases. So this win is from Lauren. She shared an incredible breakthrough that she had by following our PATH program. So Lauren is sharing how she worked on PATH on her own and learned how to focus on herself, what she could control, and how to let go of him and their situation, and how to understand his actions better. She says that her husband told her 3 weeks ago that he's ended things with the other woman and wants us to go back to counseling, that he couldn't ignore all the changes that she has made, and that he really does love her. So he's moved back into the bedroom and we're talking daily about the future together. And this is just absolutely wonderful. I see these sort of things all the time, and it might not seem like that right off the bat. I think one of the great advantages that I have with running a program like this, as opposed to something a little bit more traditional, is it's easier a bit to see the progress over time. Quite frequently, I will get someone involved in one of my programs and see all the fear and the desperation right at those first stages. And as I'm able to help them calm down and get some things going, it's great then to see posts like this. I don't think I work specifically with Lauren directly, but to see posts like this months down the road where the changes were really taken to heart and things did turn around quite a bit. The Surviving Midlife Crisis group is watching me. Well, great. Not that there's any pressure on me, right? So getting into the content a little bit here, I've sometimes talked to, when people have asked me this directly, I'll admit, I've sometimes been a bit dismissive of the phenomenon of a midlife crisis. But that's mostly because, I feel like it is a little bit misunderstood and sometimes used as a crutch or an excuse to explain some very complicated behavior. This idea of a midlife crisis was actually, just to give some background to it, was first identified by a psychologist. His name is Carl Jung. Carl Jung is a fairly famous individual, and he was a direct student of Sigmund Freud. He had his own branch, slightly different branch of psychology, where Dr. Freud was, or Sigmund Freud was, he had his analytical psychology, psychoanalytical psychology. Carl Jung started the psychodynamic school of thought in terms of psychology. And anyways, Carl Jung, he's talking about this phenomenon of the midlife crisis and makes claim that it is actually a natural or normal part of the maturing process. Not that the crisis or the unhealthy behaviors in and of themselves are good or healthy, but that this is a natural part of maturing and becoming older. Where this is really coming from, it's a transition as someone gets older, where they take stock in where they are in life and may come to some conclusions that some needed adjustments need to be made to the way that they are living. During this time, adults, might frequently evaluate achievements and goals, their dreams, against what they had wished for in the past and what stages that they're facing in life. And I think this is a really accurate description for this. You might see all sorts of different behaviors when we are seeing something like a midlife crisis, whether the person is going out and spending exorbitant amounts of money, buying toys and cars and whatnot, or maybe they are really hanging on to their youth and trying to date people much younger than them, or maybe they are pulling away from a marriage because of this, because they are reevaluating what's going on. I think another way to describe what often happens in the crisis part of the midlife crisis is where they have this evaluation and start to recognize that grief, exhaustion, or anxiety that is present in their life, and in that evaluation process say to themselves, okay, I can't have that anymore. I want you to all think about this for a moment, how this may explain some sudden changes in your partner. If you and your spouse have really been overwhelmed, we might see things like this in the overworked homemaker or the overworked breadwinner, or the spouse who feels that their identity was lost to having children, or that the relationship was lost to having children, where they say, since having children, we've never had time for each other. The really interesting thing about this, when you study happiness and life satisfaction, as much as I love my children, the statistics do not lie that there's a trend with happiness, is that it tends to go up and up and up at a mild rate, and then right around the time where most people will have their children, there is this sharp decline in life satisfaction and happiness, and that as children might grow, like as people get into their 40s, 50s, 60s, that and children might leave the house, or this person might reevaluate their life, that life satisfaction goes up again. Now, we have a comment here, where you're saying he's evaluated our life, walked far away, trying different things. Now he's developed a relationship with someone else and so much more, and I can't keep up. And this is the problem in terms of marriages and midlife crisis is, there is some valid arguments for the importance of this evaluation in life, and that quite frequently why it comes to a crisis is because there hasn't been any outlet, or there hasn't been any ability to address maybe some of this grief or exhaustion or anxiety previously. And with the evidence that is given, that it hasn't been a solution for many years, it then becomes a reasonable, even if unhealthy for the relationship, conclusion that maybe there needs to be something drastic done here, such as leaving the relationship. Now, I believe that, as with many of the problems that we talk about here on the podcast and in the programs that I write, that there needs to be, in terms of handling this, there needs to be some room here for the needs, for the emotions, for the problems to be expressed, and for there to be a healthy or safe harbor for these things, for these feelings to be expressed, and for the concerns to have a healthy outlet. Now, this doesn't necessarily solve everything, but it does at least give a possible good direction for this to go in. For instance, if the problem here is that the relationship has been evaluated and that it's been set, been determined that I cannot have my own life within this family. I mean, do you hear that? That's a terrible thing to have to live with. Even if it's for the sake of your commitment, that is a terrible choice to feel like you are having to make. Whether you can have a life of happiness where you can actually have a fulfilled life, or whether you are going to fulfill your commitments. And I don't think that that's necessarily a fair thing to say. No, you can't. You have to actually look at this and see how this is affecting me. I know that's a really hard thing to hear, but there actually is room for both sides in this. And what I mean by that is exactly like I said. There has to be some room for your partner to be able to express their feelings, their concerns, and for there to be a safe harbor for that. They need. I'm thinking back to the Gottman's model for taking care of trauma or crisis or affairs, and that it does fit here as well. I know I just actually recently talked about this in my workshop, but in the case here, there needs to be some ability to walk through this. When I'm talking about Gottman's model, I'm referring to his phases, his stages here of working through this, of atone, attune, and even attach, because we're applying this to marriage. Atone meaning like there needs to be, if you really go deep into this piece of advice, the atone phase is a lot about hearing things out to make sure that the other person feels heard, and not so much asserting what you need in that phase. There needs to be a reasonable way for them to be able to address their concern and for the current pain to stop. Yeah, and the comment here backs up what I'm saying. Is her husband is saying that exact thing. He's struggling between choosing happiness and honoring his commitment. Now, a lot of you may be in that same position, even if your husband isn't saying that directly. Where eventually you want to shift this is the idea that there doesn't have to be a choice, but you have to walk through some of this first. So we start off there, being able to listen to them and making sure that the current sources of pain, there is a way to address those concerns. So if the problem were about the overly busy schedule and the inability to have a personal life, big changes need to be made in order to address that concern. If the concern is about respect and feeling like they are a doormat, well, then there needs to be adequate attention given to make changes and help them to feel secure in the choice. If they were to come back, that it doesn't have to be as much of a choice. The going back to Gottman's model, this is just kind of the first step. The second step being that attune phase, where there needs to be some way for the two of you to tune into what's needed and to be able to address concerns as they come along without them becoming overwhelming. I mean, this is, as much as we would like to cover everything that's needed in terms of a midlife crisis in our podcast, I'm going to admit this is a complicated issue. But if we follow through some of these steps, we give some safe harbor and some ability to address the concerns. If we can tune in, help them have the tools needed to tune into needs and address concerns, and if we can allow, for some steps here to be taken to build up the relationship again, we can move past a lot of this. I do suggest that people check out the workshop that we're actually currently running. I believe that there's still an ability to at least get access to the recordings for that. We have finished our third day on that, but I go over a lot of these principles in that workshop, and I think it would be highly helpful to be able to address even these issues with something like a midlife crisis. But that's at least my thoughts on this. Now, of course, when I'm running these podcasts, apart from Heather, these are a little bit shorter. I don't have the other person. I don't have Heather to bounce a lot of these ideas off of. But just to summarize, this is not an uncommon thing. It's actually a very necessary, normal part of the maturation process. Most people are going to evaluate their lives from time to time, and you want to give some room for them to be able to voice any concerns, voice any feelings that they have with that evaluation. Otherwise, we run the risk of shutting that down and further giving them the impression that there is no way to resolve this within their relationship, that there needs to be a choice, as we were putting it. But then if you can give some room for that, and you can eventually help them to have the tools to be able to address those concerns as they come up going forward, there can be a lot more hope in the midlife crisis running its course and being able to come back. Where can you get the links for the workshop? I know that, so I'm going to be honest here, I don't often run the marketing side of things. I know there was a lot of announcements here within the Facebook group and within the emails advertising the work for the workshops. If you are working with me directly, like I said, I can't see the Facebook. I can't see the names on these comments. All I see is Facebook user with the app that I'm using. If you are working with us directly, you can let me know in either one of our sessions or one of the group calls, and I can get you that directly. So, the marriage mythbuster for this week. I will often hear people talk about how marriage is a contract. And if they don't fulfill their part, I don't have to fulfill mine. There's this idea, or a very subtly, a slightly different idea, is that marriage is a contract and that they are obligated to fulfill that. And to a certain extent, I am going to say yes. Ideally, everyone should be honoring their commitments in terms of a marriage. And of course, I wouldn't be here otherwise. Kaylee, thanks. Let me know, Kaylee, at some other point. I'll make sure to get you that information. But yeah, this idea here that because there are these vows that almost like this idea that things should happen a certain way, or that if they don't, then I have free reign to fight back or to be vindictive back or to not really fulfill my end of things. And either way this is going, it is an unhealthy view, whether you are coming from the end of, if they hurt me, I can hurt them, or if they don't fulfill their part of the contract, I don't have to fulfill mine, or since they made this commitment, they are a terrible person if they are not holding to that. Because what is being said behind all of this, or basically the implication behind all this, is that the other person's experiences or what they want out of is a bit invalid. If you're saying, well, they are a terrible person because they're not holding to this marriage commitment, like I said, to a certain extent, I get where that is coming from, but it is a disregard for what is going on with them. I think more accurate is that this idea that, yes, if people have made some commitments, the ideal should then be that there should be some effort to have some understanding if someone is struggling with that commitment. And I think that's a much healthier view. That there obviously was reasons to begin with to enter into a commitment like this, and that if someone is not holding to that commitment, then there must be some really big reasons to come away from that. The other piece here, if you are saying they didn't fulfill their part of the contract, I don't have to fulfill mine. This is, once again, getting away from that understanding that your partner's experience probably is something very different from your own. And, they have some really big reasons that need to be understood about why they might not be fulfilling their part of the contract. And if you are saying, well, then I can just do whatever here, you're missing the point. In that these things are going on because someone is very hurt. And it's not typically done lightly. So what I think really needs to happen here, in any case where you're bringing to the table that there is a commitment, you really need to take a look at how you were approaching the situation yourself and asking yourself, am I actually looking at my partner and what they're doing with a lot of care and compassion and understanding? If you are doing that well, I think you're probably handling this particular problem much better than most people. So in terms of whether you should or should not feel obligated to fulfill your part of the contract if your partner does not, I mean, obviously that's up to you, but in my personal opinion, you're not going to get any closer to a solution if you meet wrong for wrong. And much more often, the partner who is consistent with their support is much more likely to get through a crisis than the person who retaliates or is vindictive. I'm just looking at some of the comments here. Okay, so with that said, if you are wanting some more support on this in particular, like I said, I do talk about this in a bit more detail in the workshop that's going on. If you're needing a lot more support, I would hope that you would reach out to us and consider maybe some more personal support on our end. You can always see if this situation is a good fit for you by talking with one of our reps. You can go to highthrivecoaching.com/apply. And they should be able to help you out there. So that is all that we have for this week. Appreciate you all checking in, and we will be here again next week.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.